Begin. Okay, we're going to get back to talking about mezuzah. We're going to get back to talking about mezuzah. Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Lamed Aleph. We're on the last line of Lamed Amid Beis. So just to close off a loose end over here, the Gemara is going to just continue on that topic. The Gemara discussed yesterday that Rav and Bar Chinana said in the name of Ula, said in the name of Chanina, that the halacha is like Reb Shimon Shazuri, and not only that, wherever you're going to find Reb Shimon Shazuri, the halacha is going to be like him. So where was Ravin's statement? Which Reb Shimon Shazuri? Because all the other statements that we find Reb Shimon Shazuri, we find that somebody else said the halacha is like Reb Shimon Shazuri. So we don't need Ravin, or Ravin wasn't included in that list. So what situation was Ravin included in the list? What situation did Ravin was mechadish that the halacha is Reb Shimon Shazuri? And also, what does it mean that everywhere you learn Shimon Shazuri, automatically you paskin like him? So the Gemara says like this: El Amar Papa Ashida, Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Amar Ayayim. There are two cases where you'll find the Tana Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, and that's where Ravin said, "Oh, by the way, the halacha is like Rav Shimon Shazuri." Rav Papa Amar Rav Papa says it's talking about the case Ashida on the box. Okay, what is the case of the box? So we have to measure boxes. Why do you have to measure boxes? Because a box that could be mekabel tumah, right? Because it holds something. But if it holds so much, like 2 cores dry or 40 saw liquid, means it's a big box. So it's not a movable box. Once something is not a movable box anymore, it's not mekabel tumah. So how do you determine the volume of the box? So if you can see the picture, you will see here a picture of basically a machlekes between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and then there's going to be a Reb Shimon Shazuri. Beis Shammai says it's simple. You just measure the volume of the box, the inside of the box. As you can see, the person on the left side, right, is measuring the inside. Beis Hillel says you can even measure the thickness of the walls of the box, because if it adds to the weight of the box. So you measure even the walls of the box to include it in what the volume of the box is. Rabbi Yossi says you could even measure the thickness of the legs of the box to be included in volume. So you add what one leg would hold if it was hollow. And Reb Shimon Shazuri says, yes, you could add the legs, and in between the legs also, so you imagine that the box was a bigger box than it is, and as long as the legs are less than a tefach. If it's more than a tefach, then you don't measure in between the legs, and that's the machlekes. And this, we said the halacha is like Reb Shimon Shazuri. The time we learned in the Mishnah, we're on Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph. Hashida, a box. Beis Shammai, I remember Beis Shammai says, you measure the volume of the box from the inside of the box. Beis Hillel says, you measure the box, you measure the volume of the box from the outside of the box. Both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both agree. She'ein oive haraglayim v'oive halavaz bozin nimdod. The thickness of the legs, nor the thickness of the crown around it, are counted into the measurement of the volume of the box. Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion of the different machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and they hold moedim, but we both agree she'oiver aglayim v'oiver lazvodim nimdad. They both agree that the legs are counted and the crown is counted. Ubeneim and but between the legs you don't count. Reb Shimon Shazuri Reb Shimon Shazuri says, if the feet of the box is high a tefach, ein beneim nimdad, you don't count the box. You don't count in between them. V'im lav beneim nimdad. But if it's small, then you would count between the thing. So that's what Reb Shimon Mishazuri says. You see on the left side over here, on the right side over here, you would count as if the box, extended downwards, and there's a volume over here on the underside of the box, and that would be included in the volume to determine if the box is big enough to hold 2 cores, and if it is, then it's not going to be B'Kamal Tumah. On this, Ravin said that the halacha is like Rav Shimon Shazuri. Nobody discussed who you paskin like. So Ravin told us that this was the Mishnah and the source of Ravin, who said you paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Rav Nachman by Yitzchak said ayayin. There's another case called wine to determine if you paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri by the Mishnah regarding wine. The time we learned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is discussing, is oil a liquid? The halacha is that a sheni tuma that touches water, Chazal made a gzeira that any tuma that touches water will automatically turn into a rishon. Usually, if a tuma touches it, an item, it goes down a level. But water was the exception. So therefore, you have to determine what's a liquid. What's a liquid to be like water? So you find this shaila also, let's say, in ice cream. Is ice cream a liquid or is it a solid? So, or yogurt. So the question was, what is certain items? The Tanan Rameir says shemen oil, maybe it's congealed oil, but even though tchilul oilam, it could always be turned into a rishon. Shemen oil has a din like liquids. But Chacham says af hadvash, even honey. Honey is a liquid, even though congealed or it's a thicker substance, but it's considered a liquid. Shimon Sazuri says af yayin, even wine is considered a liquid. So no one ever thought that wine is not considered a liquid. So the Gemara asks right away, are you going to try to tell me that the Tanakama, Rav Meir and Chachamim disagree on regarding wine, whether it's considered a liquid? Wine certainly is a liquid. So Amy, you have to say, Rav Shimon Shazuri Omer Yayin, that wine is a liquid. That wine is a liquid. Only wine, but not oil and not honey. So that's and over there, Rav Chanina said, Ravin, in the name of Rav Chanina said, the halacha is like Rav Shimon Shazuri. So those are the instances that we had paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri. Now the Gemara is going to come to tell us a brisa, and the Gemara wants to know: are you going to paskin in a brisa like the following Rav Shimon Shazuri? Because maybe you always paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri only in the Mishnayos, but not in the brisas. So first the Gemara brings a brisa. Tanya, we learned in the brisa. Amar Rav Shimon Shazuri said, Pam achas, there was one time, nisarvli tevel b'chulim. I had tevel of, let's say, apples, 100 apples of tevel, that means no trumas amaisus was taken from it, got mixed up in chulin, of 200 chulin of apples that you did take off trumas amaisus. So now you have 300 apples, 100 were tevel, 200 are chulin. Mid'ai raisa, it's batal. You could eat from all those apples because you have roiv of chulin apples. But midrabanan, they said you still need to take off trumas from the tevel, but it's mixed in. What are you supposed to do? It's only chayiv in truma derabanan. Okay, so ubasi v'sha'alti as Rabbi Tarfon, and I came to ask Rabbi Tarfon, and the question was, how do I take off meiser at 10%? It's chayiv in truma, and it's chayiv in truma and meiser is derabanan. Well, Amali, so Rab Tarfon said like this, and here's the problem: you cannot take from another tevel, take off maisrus on behalf of this mixture, because when you take off maisrus from something else, it's gonna something that's real tevel, it's chiyav deraisa. Maybe this box is potter, and from chiyav al hapetur, you can't take off maisrus. It has to be on the same level. that they're both Durabonans, Chayiv Maisrus Midrabonans, then you can take off one on behalf of this mixture. So what did Rav Tarfon advise me? He says, buy apples from the street, from the Anam Aretz. And when you buy apples from Anam Aretz, it's Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. Va'aser alav, and take off Maisrus from that apples that you purchased from another Am Aretz, which is Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan, on behalf of your mixture. Because Rabbi Tarfon explained to Rav Shimon Shazuri that there are Raisa Ruba Batal. In your case, with 100 apples mixing in, the 100 Tevel apples mixing in with the 200 Chulin apples, with the Raisa it's Batal. Nevertheless, so you only Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. Now, when you're going to buy from a Amaretz, you Chayiv Maisrus, but not Midaraisa, because only Midarabanan, because Midaraisa we're going to say, V'roiv Amaretz Ma'asrun. Most Amaretz do Maisrus. So Midrabanan, you have to take off Maiser if you buy from an Amaretz. So therefore, you're taking off Truma. Ptura over here means from one Drabanan on behalf of something that's Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. So the stuff that you bought from the street of an Amaret, off an Amaretz, is Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan, and you're going to take off double Maiser on behalf of something that was also Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. Says the Gemara, V'lei Malay, why didn't Rab Tarfon advise Rab Shimon Shazuri, Kach lech kach min a goy, buy fruits from a goy? When you buy fruits from a goy, it's also Chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. So why didn't he advise him that? Answers the Gemara, Kasava, Rab Tarfon holds, Ein kinyan legoy b'Eretz Yisrael lafkia miyad Maisra. That a goy, just because he owns the land in Eretz Yisrael, and let's say he grew apples, that doesn't mean it's potter for Meiser. It's the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is even after the goy bought the piece of property. So therefore, when the goy harvests the fruits, it's chayiv Meiser's Midaraisa. So if you're going to buy fruits from a goy, you're going to take off Meiser's that's chayiv Midaraisa on something that's only chayiv Meiser's Midrabanan. So that's why it was not a good advice. That's why he did not give him the advice of buying from a goy. Ika de Amrei, others have a different version of what Rab Tarfon's advice to Rab Shimon Shazuri was. Amalei kach min a goy, buy it from a goy. Kesavar, because Rab Shimon Shazuri held yesh kinyan legoy b'Eretz Yisrael afkia miyad Meiser. A goy, when he purchases property in Eretz Yisrael, it becomes exempt from Maisrus Midaraisa. And therefore, if you buy the fruits from a goy, you're gonna take the fruits that you bought from the goy and take off Maisrus on that mixture of tevel in chulin, and that's from something exempt, something that's chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan on something that's chayiv Maisrus Midrabanan. According to this version, if he told him to buy from a goy, so let him advise Rab Tarfon to Rab Shimon Shazuri, buy it from the street off of an Amaretz. Kesava, Rab Tarfon held, Ein Roiv Amaretz Asram. Most Amaratzim don't give off Maisrus, and therefore it's Chayiv Meiser Midaraisa when you buy from a Jewish Amaretz. That's why, according to this version, he didn't advise him to buy from a Jewish Amaretz. Bottom line is, you have a story about Maisrus, a mixture, and Rab Tarfon advising Rab Shimon Shazuri. But this was a brisa. So Shalach le Rav Yemer b'Shleim le Rav Papa. So Rav Yemer sent a question to Rav Papa. How the Amar Ravin, that Ravin said, that the halachas Rab Shimon Shazuri, we paskin like Rab Shimon Shazuri. Not only that, el kol mokam sheshana Rab Shimon Shazuri halacha kamoisai. That wherever you're going to find Rab Shimon Shazuri learned somewhere, you paskin like him. Would you say with that whole true af b'nis arav le tevel b'chulin? In this case of the brisa of the story with the tevel getting mixed up with chulin, would you paskin like Rab Shimon Shazuri? So Rav Papa responded to Rav Yemer, and yes, you would paskin like Rab Shimon Shazuri. Now the question asked, Amar Rav Ashi, Amali Mazutra told me, Kashi Bei Rab Chanina Misura. Rab Chanina Mesuri was so surprised at this conversation of Rab Yemer to Rab Papa. And Rav Yemer is asking, do you paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri? Pshita, of course you're going to paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri. That's what it means. Kol Malkum Shoshana Rav Shimon Shazuri, the halach is kamaisai. Wherever you're going to find Rav Shimon Shazuri, you're going to paskin like him. So what was Rav Yemer's question to Rav Papa? So the answer is, and that's where we end. Mi kama b'mishnah seinu. Did Rav Chanina say that you paskin Rabbi? Would you say that perhaps Rab Chanina only meant you paskin him in Mishnayos? Kol makom shoshana kamar. He meant any place, even in Brises, you would paskin like him. In other words, the Rab Yemer's question, according to Rav Chanina Misura, shouldn't have been a question, because since it says Kol Makom Shoshana Reb Shimon Shazuri, Kol Makom Shoshana means wherever you're going to find Reb Shimon Shazuri written in the Mishnah and in a Brisa, you're going to paskin like him. So you shouldn't even have a question whether you paskin like Reb Shimon Shazuri by the case of the mixture of the maestros. Certainly you're going to paskin like Shimon Shazuri. Now we go back to our discussion regarding a mezuzah. Amar Rav Ziri, Amar Rav Chananya, Amar Rav. Not even a mezuzah, even a sefer Torah. Kera haba b'shnei chuten yitbar b'shalosh al yitbar. You have a rip in a sefer Torah, right? You have a rip in a sefer Torah. You see this in this picture where I have a marked yellow. That it depends. You have a rip in a sefer Torah. If it went through 2 lines, so then you can sew it up. If the rip was so deep that it went through 3 lines of the Sefer Torah, then it's possible. The Gemara is going to ask, what happens if the rip goes through 3 lines, but it's in between the pages? That's the Gemara is going to leave, or in between a line. So that's the Gemara is going to leave out of the question. Amar Rav said, Kera haba b'shnei shitin, if a rip rips through 2 lines, yitbar, you can sew it up, you can fix the Sefer Torah. But shalosh, if it ran through 3 lines, al yitbar, don't sew up the Sefer Torah. Amale Rabbi Ziti la Ravashi. Rabbi Zuti said to Ravashi, Hochyama Rabbi Yirmiyah medifti mishay v'Rava. Rabbi Yirmiyah from Difti said in the name of Rava the following: Hada Amram, that we said b'shalosh al yitfar, that when it's ripped through 3 lines, you don't sew it back. Le Amram elabatika, only if it's an old Sefer Torah. Avachadata less lamba, but if it's a new Sefer Torah, even if it rips through 3 lines, it's not a problem, because when you sew up a new Sefer Torah, it doesn't look so bad. And what defines old and new? Not age. That's the interesting thing. The Torah is not, it's not an old Torah. When we mean old and new, and there's the difference, it's not talking about old versus new in years. A new Sefer Torah, you didn't put walnut juice on it. And and the other one that looks older and looks more yellowy, that's because you worked it out. You worked out the parchment with walnut juice. So in that case, once you're going to sew it up, it's going to look quite ugly. Here's a picture of a guy with an old Sefer Torah, but again, it's not old. It just was done with walnut juice. So when you tie it up, it looks more funnier than when a new Sefer Torah. I don't think this picture is accurate, because I guess the only heter to sew it up is only if it's 3 lines. But you get the point. Old is not in age. Old is in how it was worked up. Bahani merely begin. Only is you could only sew it up with the sinews of an animal, of a begrodim, like a weaver using thread. Law, you don't do that. You don't sew it up with thread. Yehuda bar Abba ben daf ladaf. Let's say the rip was between one column and another column. Ben shita l'shito, between one line and the other line. What's the din? So the answer is that remains unresolved. Okay, now we go back to a mezuzah, and we'll stop in about 3 minutes because we're almost by the end of the daf. Amar Rab Zera, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav. Mezuzah shekstavoy shtayim keshera. Here's the picture. A mezuzah that was written, let's see, mezuzah that was written, shtayim shtayim means, you see the picture over here, 2 words on a line. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So it's written 2 words on a line, that's no good. But, okay. But let's say like this. Shtayim shtayim, so that was it. Shtayim, 2 words on a line, it's kosher. What happens if you ibayalahu, shtayim b'sholosh v'achas? Let's say you have 2 words on the first line, 3 words on the second line, and 1 word on the next line. As you can see in the picture, you wrote Shema Yisrael, then you wrote Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, and then you wrote Echad on another line, on the third line. And then we have the ace, Hashem Elokecha b'chol, and Levavcha. So you have 2, 3, and 1. So is that kosher? That was the question. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, Kolshkein. Certainly, Sha'aso Kishira looks like the Shira, like Oz Yasha. If you open up the Chumash and you look by the Oz Yasha, that's how you write a Shira. So that's a nicer, more exciting way to write. So said Gemara. So Rav Nachman said, Yitzchak said, you could make the mezuzah look like a Shira. Meisvei. But we have a brisa that says Aso Kishira. If you make it look like a Shira, or Shira Kamaisa, or the Shira that's written in the Torah, you make it look like a mezuzah, like plain lines. Pesula, it's both puzzle. The mezuzah is puzzle, or the Sefer Torah is puzzle. But one thing you see from this brisa, that a mezuzah that's made to look like a Shira is no good. And it says the Gemara, Kitanyihi b'Sefer Torah. That's talking about a regular Sefer Torah. The regular, let's say you take Parshas Noach and you make it look like a Shira, and you paste back Parshas B'Shalach and make it look like Parshas Noach, then it's possible. But it's okay for a mezuzah to be written like in Shira format. Itma Name, we learned the same idea. Amar Rabba Babachona, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Bamilo, Amar Rabba Acha Babachona, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, mezuzah Sha'asoi Shtayim V'Shalosh V'Achas. If you make it 2, 3, and 1, Kisheira, Rabbi Yochanan said it's straight out, it's kosher. But there's certain limitations. Uvilvad Shaloi Yasen Kakuba. Don't make it look like a pyramid. Uvilvad Shaloi Yasen Kazonav. Don't make it look like a tail. Don't make it 3, 2, 1 or 3, 2, 1 upwards, like a pyramid or a tail. So here is a kuba, like over here. Shema, and then you write Yisrael Hashem, and then you write Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You can't do that. Or Rabbi Yochanan said, because that's not Shira style. Shema Yisrael Hashem, Elokeinu Echad, that looks like a tail. It comes narrower. By the way, here is how Oz Yasha is written. You have a big wide line, then 2 words on a line, then you break up the line, and then you have in the middle, this is Shira style. So a mezuzah could be written Shira style, but not, not pyramid style, not tail style. Now the question, the Gemara gives one last halacha. We'll finish with this. Amar Rav Chizda said, Al haaretz b'shita achroina. When you're writing mezuzah, put kimei hashamayim al haaretz. The word al haaretz has to be on the last line. Okay. Now the question is, al haaretz has to be on the last line. On the beginning of the last line, as you can see on this right over here, al haaretz, or al haaretz means right underneath kimei hashamayim, as you can see in this picture, kimei hashamayim, and then right underneath al haaretz, not towards the right margin. So Amar Chizda al haaretz b'shita achroina. Some say b'sayf shita, you put it at the end of the line. You put the al haaretz at the beginning of the line. The one that says you put it at the end of the line, because it says ki kvoya shamayim al haaretz, that what the pasuk is saying, that just like the word shamayim is on top of the word aretz, so just like heaven, there's a distance between heaven and earth, so also, and there's trillions of light years between heaven and earth, so also Hashem is going to lengthen our years al hadama, just like the distance between Shemayim and Aretz. And while others say you put the al haaretz at the beginning of the line, just like there's the Shemayim Aretz are distant from each other, right? They're distant from each other. So also not just above each other, but they're distance from each other. So that's the way Hashem will lengthen our days. So that was the question, whether you put the Al Haaretz over underneath it, like the Shemayim is on top of the Aretz, or Shemayim is so far away from the Aretz. So that was the question of where do you end off the mezuzah. Okay, this ends Daf Lamed Aleph.
Thanks so much.
Hey, good Nacht, everybody.
Good Nacht,
Thank you very much.